The air on the planet Alethar was dry and thick, the kind that seemed to suck the breath from your lungs with every step. Alex squinted against the harsh sunlight, feeling the weight of his mission pressing down on him. He had been sent to explore this uncharted world, gathering data for Earth's space exploration program. The journey had been long, and the planet's arid surface was not what he had expected. With a sigh, Alex adjusted the straps on his backpack, checking the scanner. On his wrist, readings were coming in, confirming that the planet's atmosphere was breathable, but the temperature was dangerously high. Sweat trickled down the back of his neck as he took another step forward. His boots crunched against the dry earth beneath him. In the distance, a shadow moved. At first, Alex thought it was a trick of the heat, the air shimmering and distorting everything around him. But then the shadow became clearer, an unmistakable shape of a figure walking in his direction. "Who's there?" Lex called, though he knew there was no way anyone could be out here in this desolate land. His voice sounded strange in the emptiness, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was nearby. The figure grew closer, and to Alex's shock, it was a girl, but not like any human girl. She was tall, with pale blue skin that shimmered under the intense sunlight. Her hair was long and silver, cascading down her back like a river of light. She wore simple, flowing clothing, something that seemed to ripple as she moved. Alex froze, unsure of how to react. He had encountered alien life forms before, but this was different. This wasn't a robotic drone or an animal. This was a person, a sentient being. The girl stopped a few feet away, her body stiff with tension. She looked at Alex with wide, startled eyes. "You're human?" she asked in a soft voice, her tone filled with awe and curiosity. Alex blinked, unsure of how to respond. He had never met an alien before, let alone one who could speak his language. "Yes, I am," he said cautiously, taking a careful step toward her. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The girl took a deep breath and then winced, her body trembling slightly. I am Lyra," she said, her voice strained. Seemed to sway slightly, as if the heat was getting to her. "I'm not used to this heat." Alex looked at her, concern beginning to form in his chest. She seemed uncomfortable. Her skin flushed a reddish hue as she took a few wobbly steps forward. Her breathing was shallow, and it was clear she was struggling to cope with the planet's extreme temperature. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, moving closer to her. Lyra winced again, looking up at him with a faint smile. "I'm not sure. My body can't handle heat like this. I need to cool down, but it's hard." Alex's mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. He had come to the planet to gather data, but he hadn't expected to find a living alien, especially one in distress.
Aye.
He checked his wrist scanner again. The temperature had already hit a scorching 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was still rising. "You need help," Alex said, his voice soft but firm. He took a step forward, his eyes scanning the area for anything that could offer some shelter or relief from the heat. He didn't know what to do for an alien, but he couldn't just leave her. "I'm fine," Lyra said quickly, though her voice betrayed her. "I just need to find some shade, and maybe—" She hesitated, looking around, then back at Alex. "I need to cool off." Alex felt a wave of sympathy for her. It was clear she was uncomfortable, perhaps in pain and in desperate need of help. He stepped closer, offering her his water canteen. "Here, take this. It's not much, but it might help." Lyra shook her head slightly. "Water doesn't help. Not for me. I need to," she faltered, looking embarrassed. "I need to remove some of my clothes. It's the only way I can cool down in this heat." Alex blinked, taken aback. The situation was more complicated than he had imagined. He had never considered the fact that different alien species might have such unique needs. His training had prepared him for everything from hostile creatures to advanced technology, but this was new. Lyra, noticing his hesitation, sighed. "I'm not like humans. My body works differently. My species can't sweat like you do. If I don't cool off soon, I'll pass out." Alex looked around quickly. They were in the middle of nowhere, with only the endless stretch of desert around them, there was no one else in sight. He turned his gaze back to Lyra, who was clearly suffering. "Okay, I understand," Alex said, trying his best to stay calm. "I'll look away, and you do what you need to do." Lyra gave him a grateful look, and with a fluid motion, she removed the top layer of her clothing, revealing a delicate, almost ethereal body beneath. Her skin shimmered slightly, a pale blue that seemed to reflect the sunlight in a mesmerizing way. She didn't seem self-conscious or embarrassed, but Alex couldn't help but feel a bit awkward. Turning his back to her out of respect as she took off the last of her clothing, Alex heard her exhale in relief. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice a little stronger now. "I'll be okay now. Just need a moment." Alex nodded, still facing away. He wasn't sure what to do next. He was alone on an alien planet with an alien girl who seemed to be in need of help, and now was an awkward silence between them. He had no idea what to expect next, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't leave her here, not when she needed him the most. The intense heat was relentless, but as Lyra sat down beneath the small patch of shade Alex had found, she seemed to be recovering. Her breathing was still shallow, but the redness in her skin had faded, and she appeared less frazzled.
Alex sat
a few feet away, keeping his distance as she slowly gathered her strength. "So," Alex began, trying to break the silence. "What happened?" "I've never seen anyone react like that to heat. I mean, I've been in some tough spots before, but nothing like this." Lyra turned her head toward him, her silver hair flowing around her face as she did. There was a softness in her gaze, but her expression was serious. "It's my species," she said, her voice quieter now. "We're not like humans. We don't sweat, and we don't regulate our body temperature in the same way. Heat like this, ... It's overwhelming for us." Alex frowned, trying to process what she was saying. "So your body can't handle the heat at all?" "No," Lyra admitted, shaking her head. "Not like you can survive in warmer climates than humans. But there's a limit. People are from a planet that's much colder. So when the temperature rises above a certain point, we start to overheat." Alex's mind was racing. He had studied alien life forms for years, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. "So what happens if you don't cool down in time?" Lyra's expression darkened, and her voice dropped even lower. "We pass out, and if we're not helped quickly, we can ... die. It's not common, but it happens sometimes, especially if we're unprepared." Alex's heart sank at her words. "That's terrifying. I had no idea." Lyra shrugged lightly, as though it wasn't a big deal. "It's just part of life for us. We learn how to cope with it, but even so, extreme conditions like this are difficult." Alex nodded slowly, his mind processing the information. He had no idea what it would be like to live in constant fear of the environment around you. On Earth, they had technology to regulate temperatures, build cities with climate control. But here, on this alien planet, Lyra was completely vulnerable to the elements. "That's why I had to remove my clothing," Lyra continued, still sitting. With her legs crossed, her face now a little more relaxed. "It's how we manage the heat. The less we wear, the more air we can get to our skin. It helps cool us down faster. Otherwise, we'd be trapped inside our own bodies, unable to survive." Alex's eyes widened, understanding finally dawning. "So you don't have sweat? Glands or something like that?" Lyra shook her head. "No, it's not just sweat. We can't cool ourselves down that way. That's why we depend on the environment to help us. That's also why we wear clothing that's breathable and light." "That's fascinating," Alex said, still trying to wrap his head around it. "But how does this whole no-sweat thing work in the long run? Don't you get too hot sometimes?" Lyra smiled faintly, though there was a hint of sadness in her expression. "We do, sometimes, but we've adapted. Our bodies are built to handle colder climates. When it gets too warm, we have to go into hiding. We live in the colder regions, underground or in the mountains. But when we travel or explore places like this," she gestured to the vast desert landscape, "it's much harder." Alex thought about this for a moment. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about adapting to a completely different set of rules. His species had mastered technology. But Lyris had mastered survival in a world that was both beautiful and dangerous. "I've never heard of anyone needing to cool off like that," Calyx said, more to himself than to her. "I mean, we're taught about survival skills, but we never think about things like this. You can't just use a cooling system or jump into water to cool off." Lyra's expression softened, and she seemed to understand his thoughts. "I know, it's a strange thing to comprehend, but it's part of our biology. And even though it might seem simple, it's incredibly important. Without this, our bodies would not survive in places like this." Alex sat quietly, contemplating what she had said. He could see the immense difference in how humans and aliens could be affected by the same environment, and it made him respect Lyra's species even more. But the more he thought about it, the more something about this situation nagged at him. It was one thing to learn about an alien species, but it was another thing entirely to actually be involved in their survival. "So, if I hadn't been here to help," Alex began cautiously, "what would have happened?" "You said you could die if you don't cool off in time." Lyra's gaze grew distant for a moment. She seemed to be considering his question carefully. Finally, she looked back at him. "I would have passed out, and if no one had come, I would have died eventually. It's a risk we take when we explore new places. Sometimes we make it, sometimes we don't." Alex felt a heavy weight on his chest. Couldn't imagine living like that, always vulnerable to the elements, always at risk. It seemed like something out of a nightmare. But it was Lyra's reality. "I'm glad I could help," Alex said softly, his voice sincere. "But I don't want you to think you're alone out here. I'll help you get through this." Lyra nodded, giving him a small smile. "Thank you, Alex. I appreciate your kindness. Not many humans would help someone they just met." "I wasn't sure what to expect." Alex chuckled softly. "I wasn't sure either. I don't think I could have just walked away. Not after seeing you like that." There was a brief silence between them, but it was comfortable. Lyra looked up at the sky, the sun beginning to dip lower, casting an orange glow across the landscape. The heat was still intense, but now that Lyra was starting to recover, Alex felt a sense of relief. Still, they weren't out of danger yet. The temperature would drop soon, but the challenges of this strange world were far from over. "So, now what?" Alex asked, looking at the horizon. "Are we safe for now?" Lyra nodded. "Well, yes. But we need to keep moving if we want to avoid the worst of the storm that's coming. I can feel it in the air." "Right. Let's get ready," Alex said, adjusting his backpack and standing up. "We're in this together." The winds began to pick up, carrying with them the first hints of something more dangerous. Alex stood up, looking over the horizon, where the bright sky had started to darken. A faint rumble echoed through the air, barely audible over the howling winds, but it was enough to make his heart race. "That's not good," he muttered, glancing at Lyra. She was still sitting on the ground, looking up at the changing sky, but now there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. "It's a storm," Lyra said quietly, pushing herself to her feet with some difficulty. She seemed much better than she had earlier, her color returning to normal. But the tension in her posture suggested she knew exactly what was coming. "Shouldn't we take cover somewhere?" Alex asked, his voice laced with urgency. The storm was coming fast, and the last thing he wanted was to be caught out in the open with no shelter. Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "We need to find shelter quickly. This storm is different. It's not just wind and rain. The temperature will drop drastically, and the winds will pick up to dangerous levels. If we don't find cover soon, we might not make it." Alex looked around, his mind racing. There was nothing for miles except desert and rocky outcrops. He cursed under his breath, realizing just how unprepared he was for this. "We can't just wait here," then he said, looking back at Lyra. "Do you have any idea where we can go?" Lyra's eyes scanned the landscape, her gaze sharp despite the obvious exhaustion she'd been through. "There's a cave system nearby," she said after a moment. "It's about a mile to the east. We can make it if we hurry." Without wasting another second, Alex adjusted his gear and set off in the direction Lyra pointed. She followed closely behind, moving faster now that she seemed to have regained her strength. But the wind was already picking up, and the air was growing colder by the minute. As they ran, Alex could feel the temperature plummeting. the harsh winds cutting through his clothes. It was a stark contrast to the heat they'd experienced earlier. Lyra was struggling to keep up, her pace slower than his, but she was determined. "Don't push yourself too hard." Alex called over his shoulder. "We need to stay together." "Fine," Lyra replied through gritted teeth. "Just focus on the cave." The storm hit harder as they moved, the winds now howling, whipping dust and debris through the air. The temperature dropped to an almost unbearable level, and Alex could see his breath forming in the cold air. He looked back at Lyra and saw that she was shivering, her body visibly shaking from the sudden cold. "This is insane," Alex muttered, trying to push forward against the fierce winds. "We need to hurry." They kept running, each step feeling more difficult than the last. The storm seemed to intensify with every passing minute, and Alex could feel his energy draining. He glanced at Lyra again. She wasn't as fast as before, her movements slowing down, her face pale against the backdrop of the storm. "Lyra?" he shouted, his voice nearly drowned out by the wind. "Come on, we're almost there." She didn't answer, but he could see that she was struggling. Skin, once a soft blue, had taken on a darker hue, a sign of the cold affecting her alien physiology. Alex's heart raced with concern as he pushed himself harder, trying to reach the cave that had now become their only hope for survival. Finally, through the swirling storm, Alex spotted the entrance to the cave, a small opening in the side of a rocky hill. He made a run for it, shouting back to Lyra to follow him. She was still a few yards behind, but she was trying, her movements stiff and labored. "Please, come on," Alex urged, his voice cracking with worry. With one last burst of energy, Lyra stumbled into the cave just as the wind threatened to knock her off her feet. Alex grabbed her arm, pulling her inside just as the storm reached its peak. The wind howled furiously outside, but inside the cave, it was silent. They both collapsed onto the cold, hard ground, gasping for breath. Lyra sat there, trembling, her eyes closed, as she fought to steady her breathing. Alex took a deep breath, finally, allowing himself to relax now that they were safe for the moment. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, his voice gentle. Lyra nodded slowly, though her face was still pale. "I'll be fine," she said, but Alex could see that she was struggling. The cold had affected her more than she was letting on, and he couldn't help but feel guilty for not doing more to help her. He reached into his pack, pulling out the small heat pack he had brought with him for emergencies. It wasn't much, but it could help. He handed it to Lyra, who accepted it with a grateful look. "Thanks," she said quietly, her voice still weak. She activated the heat pack, pressing it against her chest. The warmth seemed to soothe her immediately, and she let out a small sigh of relief. For a moment, the two of them sat in silence, listening to the storm outside. The wind howled and roared, but at least they were safe for now. "We've made it," Alex said, breaking the silence. "But I don't know how long we can stay here." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes tired but determined. "We'll stay until the storm passes," she said softly. "But after that, we need to keep moving. The storm may be over, but there are still dangers out there."
Alex nodded.
He wasn't sure what dangers Lyra was referring to, but he knew one thing for sure: they couldn't afford to waste time. They had come this far, and they weren't going to stop now. "Right?" Alex said. "We stick together. We'll get through this." Lyra gave him a small, thankful smile, and for a moment the weight of their situation seemed to lift. But Alex knew this was just the beginning. The storm had been a warning, a reminder of how unforgiving this alien world could be. They had survived this challenge, but how many more would they face before they could leave this place? Only time would tell. The storm raged on outside the cave, but inside, Alex and Lyra had found a fragile moment of peace. The wind howled, whipping the rocks and dust against the entrance, but the cave offered a welcome shelter. The temperature had dropped so dramatically that Alex could see his breath in the air, but it was nothing compared to the chill Lyra had experienced. She had already begun to recover, her color returning to a softer shade of blue, her breathing steady once more. But Alex could still see traces of the exhaustion in her eyes. She had been through so much, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility for her safety. Alex, sitting across from her, pulled out another ration bar from his pack and took a bite. It wasn't much, but it was food, something he could offer her. Lyra had been sitting still for a few minutes now, pressing the heat pack against her chest, her eyes closed as she focused on its warmth. Lyra opened her eyes and looked at him. "Thank you for helping me," she said quietly, her voice soft but sincere. Alex shrugged, offering her a small smile. "It's nothing. I couldn't just leave you out there in that storm. I didn't think I would make it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you saved me." Alex looked away for a moment, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't used to thinking of himself as a hero, but in that moment, with Lyra sitting there, safe and recovering, he realized how much he had come to care for her. She wasn't just some alien he had met on an unknown planet. She was a person, someone who was now depending on him. He cleared his throat, trying to push the emotions aside. "We're not out of danger yet," he said. "The storm will pass, but we still need to keep moving. I'm not sure how much time we have before it gets worse again." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "You're right. Can't afford to wait too long. My body is sensitive to both heat and cold, so staying in one place too long isn't safe for me. I'll need to get moving once I've regained enough strength." Alex had been wondering how she was holding up physically, but he hadn't wanted to ask directly. He had been concerned enough about her condition earlier, but now, seeing that she was starting to look better, he could see how strong she really was, mentally and physically. "I think you've already made a pretty good recovery," Alex said, offering her another ration bar. "We've been through worse, right?" Lyra smiled, though it was faint. "Yes, I suppose we have." She took the food from him, but she didn't eat it right away. Instead, she looked out at the storm, as if contemplating something. "The storm should pass by tomorrow," she said, her voice steady. "We'll have a brief window to move. After that, we'll need to find a safer place to stay." "Good," Alex said. "I can't stay here long. I'll be ready to go once you are." Lyra looked at him, a faint hint of gratitude in her eyes. "I've never met anyone like you, Alex," she said. "Most humans are afraid of us, of my people. They think we're dangerous or too different. But you—" She paused for a moment, her gaze softening. "You've been kind." Alex felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. He wasn't sure why her praise affected him so deeply. After all, he had only done what anyone would do. But hearing her speak about humanity's general attitude toward her people made him realize just how much he was breaking the mold. "It's easy to be kind when you're helping someone who's in trouble," Alex said. It's not about being human or alien. It's about doing what's right." Lyra's smile widened, though it was still small. She reached for the ration bar and took a bite, chewing slowly as she thought. "Maybe that's the problem," she said. "Too many people focus on differences. We all live in the same universe, yet we can't seem to accept each other." Alex nodded thoughtfully. He had often wondered how different species across the universe could coexist when they had so many differences. But here with Lyra, he felt like he was seeing the universe in a new way. Perhaps humanity's journey into space wasn't just about exploration. It was about learning how to connect with others, no matter where they came from. "I agree," he said, the weight of her words settling in his mind. "But maybe that's why we're here, to help show that it's possible, that it's okay to look past the differences." Lyra's gaze softened even further as she looked at him. "I hope you're right. My people have been so isolated for so long. We've built walls around ourselves, afraid of the unknown. But maybe you're the first human who's ever really seen us for who we are." Alex didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't sure if he was the first human to truly see Lyra's people, or if he was simply in the right place at the right time. But he could feel the weight of her words, and he knew that this journey wasn't just about surviving or completing a mission. It was about something more. It was about understanding, compassion, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't as divided as it seemed. The storm outside raged on, but the cave was now a place of temporary peace. Lyra's strength was returning, and she was more alert, no longer trembling from the cold. The heat pack had helped, and though she still appeared exhausted, she seemed in much better spirits. "I'll be ready in the morning," Lyra said finally, breaking the silence. "We'll make it through." Alex nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. We'll stick together, no matter what. Lyra's smile mirrored his, though it was full of gratitude. Thank you, Alex. I'll never forget this. Alex watched. As Lyra settled against the cave wall, wrapping herself in the last of the warmth from the heat pack, he wasn't sure what the future held for them, but for the first time since arriving on this planet, he felt a sense of hope. Maybe they weren't so different after all as the storm continued to rage outside. Alex closed his eyes and leaned back against the cave wall, listening to the sound of the wind. Tomorrow, they would face whatever came next, but for tonight, they were safe. The storm had finally passed. The winds had quieted, and the temperature, though still chilly, was more bearable. Alex sat by the entrance of the cave, watching the horizon as the first light of morning broke over the landscape. The sky was a soft pink, and the air felt fresher now that the storm had cleared. Lyra sat beside him, her once weak body now fully recovered. She looked stronger than ever, her skin gleaming faintly in the light of the new day. Her eyes were still tired, but the determination in them was clear. It was like she had been reborn, a testament to her strength and resilience. You ready? To move out? Alex asked, breaking the silence. Lyra nodded, standing up and stretching her limbs. Yes. We can't waste any more time. The longer we stay here, the more dangerous it becomes. There are creatures on this planet that are drawn to heat and will follow the storm's wake. Creatures? Alex raised an eyebrow. He had heard some stories about alien wildlife, but nothing had prepared him for what Lyra was describing. Yes, Lyra replied, her voice low and serious. We need to be careful. Creatures here are fast and strong. They can track us by the heat we give off. If we stay too long in one spot, we become targets. Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. The idea of being hunted by predators in an unfamiliar world was enough to make anyone uneasy. But with Lyra by his side, he felt a strange sense of calm. He wasn't alone. Got it, Alex said, standing up and grabbing his gear. Let's move. The two of them set off, carefully picking their way through the rocky terrain, keeping their eyes open for any signs of danger. The landscape was vast and barren, with only scattered patches of sparse vegetation. The ground beneath their feet was rocky and uneven, making travel slow. But the silence that surrounded them felt oppressive, as if something was watching. Waiting as they made their way across the desert, Alex kept his senses sharp, his hand instinctively resting on the blaster at his side. He wasn't sure what they would face next, but he was ready for whatever came their way. The thought of the creatures Lyra had warned him about kept him on edge. His every step calculated and cautious. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher into the sky. The heat was starting to build again, and Alex could feel the sweat trickling down his neck. Lyra, too, seemed to be feeling the effects of the rising temperature, though she didn't show it outwardly. Her cool, calm demeanor remained intact. I think we're getting closer to the caves, Lyra said, her voice steady. We'll have shelter there for a while, but we have to stay alert. The predators will come out soon. Alex nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had never been a fan of being on edge, but he knew this was the only way they could survive. Lyra said there were dangerous creatures here. He had no reason to doubt her. Her experience in this harsh environment was more valuable than anything he could learn from his training back on Earth. Suddenly, Lyra stopped in her tracks, her eyes wide as she stared at something in the distance. Heart rate quickening. In the distance, a shape moved fast, too fast for something so large. What is that? Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra's expression turned grim. It's one of them, a Skullvash. The creature was massive, with long, muscular limbs and a body covered in scales that reflected the light of the sun. It moved swiftly, its eyes glowing with an eerie, predatory intensity. Its large, powerful jaws were bared, and it looked like it was hunting. Is it ... coming toward us? Alex asked, his voice tight. Lyra nodded, her face pale. Yes, we need to move now? Without another word, they began to run. The Skullvash was fast, far faster than Alex had anticipated. It moved with a frightening grace, its claws digging into the ground as it closed in on them. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed himself to run faster, his muscles burning from the exertion. Lyra was ahead of him, her speed impressive, despite the fatigue from the previous days. But even with her agility, it was clear that the creature was gaining on them. "Faster," Lyra urged, her voice urgent as she glanced over her shoulder. "We need to reach the cave. It's our only chance." Alex pushed his legs harder, willing himself to run faster, even as his breath became ragged. The Skullvash was closer now, its deep growls filling the air as it pursued them with terrifying precision. He could hear its claws scraping against the rocks as it closed in. The cave was only a few hundred yards away, but it felt like miles. Alex's muscles screamed in protest, but he kept moving. They had to make it, just as he thought they wouldn't make it. Lyra reached the entrance to the cave. She turned to look back at Alex, her face filled with determination. "Go!" she shouted. "Get inside!" Alex didn't hesitate. He dove into the cave, sliding on the loose stones and landing with a heavy thud inside. He rolled to his feet, quickly reaching for his blaster. The Skullvash was just a few steps away now, its massive jaws snapping as it snarled. Lyra was already inside, her back pressed against the cave wall as she looked at Alex, her eyes wide. "Get ready." Aimed his blaster, his hands steady despite the adrenaline rushing through him. He fired, the shot hitting the creature square in the chest. The Skullvash roared in pain, stumbling back, but it didn't stop. It charged at them with renewed fury. "Lyra, do you have anything?" Alex shouted as he took another shot. "Have a few tricks," she said, her voice calm. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small device. Without hesitation, she pressed a button, and a high-pitched sound filled the air. The Skullvash paused, its massive head tilting as it looked confused. Lyra didn't hesitate. She grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him further into the cave. Creature let out a final growl before turning and retreating, the sound of its footsteps fading as it ran off into the distance. Alex let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, his body trembling from the close call. He turned to Lyra, his heart still racing. "That was too close," he said, his voice shaky. Lyra nodded, her face serious. "That's just a taste of what this planet has to offer. We need to be ready for anything." Alex wiped the sweat from his brow, his mind still spinning from the encounter. This planet wasn't just dangerous, it was alive with threats, hidden in plain sight. They had made it to the cave, but Alex knew their journey was far from over. The cave was dark, the walls jagged and cold, but it offered them a moment of safety. Alex leaned against one of the larger rocks inside, breathing heavily, his body still thrumming with adrenaline from the close encounter. Lyra was beside him, her eyes scanning the entrance of the cave, always alert. Her expression was unreadable, but Alex could tell that the danger they had just faced had affected her too. "We're safe for now," Lyra said quietly, her voice calm but still tinged with the stress of the situation. "The Skullvash won't return for a while?" Alex nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had never been so close to a predator before. Even though they had made it to safety, the adrenaline was still coursing through him, making his muscles tight and his mind race. He glanced over at Lyra, who seemed to be more in control than he was, though he could see the signs of her exhaustion. "You okay?" Alex asked, his voice gentle but sincere. Lyra met his gaze and offered him a small, reassuring smile. "Fine, I've dealt with worse." She paused and gave him a thoughtful look. "But thank you. You stood your ground. You're braver than most humans I've met." Alex didn't know how to respond to that. Wasn't sure if he was brave or just terrified, but hearing her praise him made him feel stronger, more capable. He had been just a regular guy, thrown into this wild situation, but now he felt like he was becoming part of something much bigger, something important. "We need to plan our next move," Lyra said after a moment, standing up and brushing dust from her clothes. "The storm has passed, but the planet is still dangerous. Can't stay here long." Alex glanced around the dark cave, noting how the shadows seemed to stretch and shift as the sunlight outside faded. "What's the plan? Are we heading back to where I first found you? Or is there another place that's safer? Lyra hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the cave entrance. The world outside seemed peaceful now, but Alex knew better. Things could change in an instant on a planet like this. The predators, the storms, the ever-shifting temperature was a land of constant danger. I think it's better if we head toward the highlands, Lyra said. There's a village there, safe place for my people. It's a risk, but it's our best option. Alex nodded, absorbing the information. A village. That meant there might be others. More aliens. More risks, but also more support. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the idea of finding a place where he wouldn't have to rely solely on his instincts seemed like the right choice. Lead the way, Alex said, pushing himself up from the ground. I trust you, Lyra gave him a small nod and began to move toward the cave's narrow entrance. She paused, glancing back at him. You should be careful, Alex. Not all of my people will be as welcoming as I am. Why's that? Alex asked, his curiosity piqued. Lyra's eyes softened, but her expression grew more serious. Humans haven't always been kind to us. Some of my people believe that your species is a threat, that we can't trust you. It's not that they want to harm you, but fear often leads to distrust. Alex took a deep breath, absorbing her words. He had heard about intergalactic tensions before, but he had never considered how they might affect him personally. The universe was a vast and complicated place, and humans weren't always seen as the noble explorers they thought they were. I get it, Alex said quietly. I'll be careful. With one final glance toward the cave entrance, Lyra stepped outside, and Alex followed closely behind. The sun was now low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. The temperature had dropped, but it was still far from comfortable. As they moved forward, the landscape seemed endless, a sea of sand and jagged stones stretching far beyond what Alex could see. Lyra moved with purpose, her body strong and graceful as though she knew the land better than anyone. Alex kept pace beside her, but the sense of unease in his chest remained. The thought of meeting more of Lyra's people, of encountering beings who might not see him as an Alois, unnerving. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of their boots against the ground, and the distant calls of alien creatures that echoed across the open landscape. The highlands Lyra spoke of were still far off, but Alex could tell she was keeping track of their position. Every few minutes, she would glance over her shoulder, her eyes sharp and observant. Do you think we're being followed? Alex asked, his voice low. Lyra didn't answer right away, but Alex noticed the tension in her shoulders. I don't know, she said after a moment. There are many creatures here that are curious, but not all of them are dangerous. It's just the predators we need to worry about. They follow the scent of warmth. We can't afford to let our guard down. Alex felt a chill run through him at her words. The thought of being hunted again wasn't something he was eager to experience. He glanced up at the sky, watching as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, leaving the world around them in darkness. There's something about this place, Alex said, more to himself than to Lyra. It's beautiful, but it feels wrong, like it's alive in a way I can't understand. Lyra glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. It is alive. In more ways than you think. This planet has its own rhythms, its own dangers. But it also has beauty like everything in the universe. Alex nodded, deep in thought. Couldn't help but feel a strange sense of connection to this place, even as it threatened to swallow them whole. Perhaps it was the vastness, the isolation. Or maybe it was the people who lived here, people like Lyra. They continued on, the weight of the unknown pressing in on them. Alex had come to this planet as an explorer, but now he was something. Mara, survivor. A witness to a world so different from his own, and yet, in so many ways, so similar. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. He wouldn't be facing it alone.